We tell ourselves a simple story about the people we admire. We believe the boy wizard and the girl on fire are righteous by nature, while the dark lord and the dictator are born as aberrations, shards of pure evil that exist outside the human experience. But if we look closely at the methods, the rage, and the desperate hunger for control that define Harry Potter or Katniss Everdeen, the gap between the hero and the monster begins to feel dangerously thin. Analyzing these characters reveals a striking symmetry. The traditional wall we build between the savior and the villain isn't a solid barrier, it's a mirror. The hero and the nemesis often operate on the same psychological engine. They are less like opposites and more like twins who suffered the same wound but walked away with different scars. To understand why one person saves a world while another enslaves it, we have to look past the capes and the wands. We have to see how a monster is built from the same raw materials as a saint. Every story begins with a system that has already failed. Panem is built on state-sponsored starvation. The wizarding world is defined by ancient blood prejudices. These aren't just backdrops, they are pressure cookers. Within these broken worlds, our four subjects start in the same shadow. Voldemort, Snow, Harry, and Katniss are all outcasts. Orphans left to fend for themselves in a society that doesn't want them. This lack of a safety net creates total isolation. As an orphan, the world is a battlefield. Every interaction is a threat to be managed, and every adult is a potential enemy. This shared origin is the first piece of the puzzle. Severe trauma doesn't automatically create a good person, it creates a survivor, willing to do whatever it takes to stay alive. When you grow up in a battlefield, your mind adopts a permanent survivalist posture. For both the future hero and the future villain, life is not about thriving, it's about not being crushed. This leads to an intense, desperate need for agency. If they can control their environment, their resources, and the people around them, they can ensure they are never powerless again. This drive separates them. While others might endure their lot, these characters refuse to be passive. In these early years, their ambitions are indistinguishable. The hero's search for a home and the villain's search for a throne come from the exact same source, the fear of being a victim. We often misread this drive in heroes. We call it destiny or inherent courage, but it's often just the same trauma-fueled ambition that we find so terrifying in their enemies. At this stage, ambition isn't a moral choice. It's a defensive wall designed to make sure the world can never hurt them again. If their origins, their pain, and their need for control are so similar, where does the path actually split? What is it that finally turns one survivor into a savior and the other into a tyrant? The path splits the moment they obtain power. The villain chooses total safety, subjugating everyone else to eliminate threats. But the hero makes a difficult choice, willfully staying vulnerable to protect the very people the system tried to break. This reveals the core truth of the villain. They aren't inherently more powerful or even more evil. They are simply survivors who reached a point where they were too afraid to ever be vulnerable again. This framework changes how we see the hero's journey. It reframes a hero like Harry or Katniss, not as a beacon of light, but as someone constantly fighting the same impulse to pull the ladder up behind them. We like to think of goodness as a permanent trait, or something granted by a prophecy, but those are just stories we tell to make morality feel easy. A villain is what happens when a hero collapses under pressure. It's the result of choosing self-preservation over the risk of love or connection. The line between a savior and a monster is a choice made every single day. It reminds us that our potential for darkness isn't a distant threat. It's determined by how we choose to use our own pain.